You're listening to For the Record with Tess Hurd. I'm Tess Hurd, and this is For the Record. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of For the Record with Tess Hurd. I'm Tess Hurd, and this is For the Record. I hope that you all have had an incredible week and an even more incredible Friday, or whatever day it is you're listening to this on. Maybe you prefer your true crime in the middle of the week, or maybe you like to sit back on Sundays after church and kick back with a true crime podcast. Either way, we're happy to have you here, and thank you for listening to this episode. I am still working on getting all of the information for the original case that I wanted to cover last week. So I decided that this week we were going to talk about the second option that I put in the Facebook group last week to fill in some gaps until I can actually get the case that I want to talk about covered. So last week we talked about the drama and some of the issues that had surrounded the Netflix documentary Depp versus Heard. And if you haven't listened to that episode, go and check it out, because I personally think that it was one of the best episodes yet. But then again, I haven't finished this one, and I think that this one is one that I am going to get very fired up about. So what are we going to talk about this week? If you're part of the Facebook group, then you probably already know if you saw the poll. If you're not part of the Facebook group, then I guess it's time for me to tell you. This week, we are going to be talking about what I am calling criminal care. Well, what's criminal care? Criminal care is healthcare. If you have ever had to have any type of treatment for anything, then you would know that healthcare is a crime, or at least it should be. It's, and I'm going to repeat this, criminal. Healthcare and insurance are scams. Oh boy. So I'm going to give you a little backstory and a little information about myself. And I've dropped stuff about myself throughout all of the episodes, but we're really going to dive into it. And I mean, yeah, this is super personal to me, but you have to talk about the things that are personal to you, because if you don't, then how are you ever going to make a difference? So I am a type 1 diabetic. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes whenever I was 2 years old. I did not eat too much sugar. I was not an overweight child. I had never even had an ice cream cone before. I was a healthy kid. Type 1 diabetes is not caused by being overweight or eating too much sugar, and they've come to find out that it's not even purely genetic. It is simply an autoimmune disease that attacks the part of the pancreas that produces insulin. You need insulin to regulate the blood glucose levels in your body and keep you from having high glucose levels. It's also a growth hormone. So it's a really important thing to have in your body. It helps regulate hormones. It helps send signals to the right places. It is a necessity in our bodies. We cannot live without insulin. A type 1 diabetic does not make any insulin whatsoever. That part of their pancreas is dead, pretty much. So, type 1 diabetics have to take insulin, either through injections or insulin pumps. And that is how they survive. That is how we survive, is through injecting or pumping insulin. I like to say that insulin is the only drug that prevents you from getting high. I think that's a funny little diabetic joke. So I was diagnosed whenever I was 2 years old. Technology and treatment have come a crazy long way since my diagnosis. For the majority of my life, I was on shots. I was on an insulin pump whenever I was 12, I think 12 to 13, and I hated it. And so I came off of it, went back to shots, refused to get back on an insulin pump until I discovered that there was a tubeless insulin pump. Then whenever I found out about it, my insurance wouldn't cover it, so I couldn't get it. And it took almost going blind and having to have eye surgeries to meet the insurance deductible so that I could afford to get the insulin pump and get started on it. And that's a big thing that we're going to talk about. So being a diabetic, you have to have certain things like insulin. You have to be able to have insulin. You have to be able to have a way to get that insulin into your body. You have to have a way to check your blood glucose levels, or as I call it, your blood sugars. You have to be able to have stuff to treat if your blood sugar goes too low or goes too high. I mean, every single day you are making 1,000 decisions that affect your quality of life and if you're going to stay alive or not. On top of that, you have people who are insulin resistant, which means that they do not absorb insulin like they should. It means that they have to take more insulin than what someone else might have to take in order to get the same result. I personally am extremely insulin resistant. There are a lot of factors in that. One of the biggest factors is that on top of having type 1 diabetes, I also have PCOS, which adds just a whole plethora of problems to diabetes, and diabetes adds a whole plethora of problems to the PCOS. For me personally, I use roughly 6 vials of insulin every month. Some people that I know only use 1 or 2 vials every month. And I'm not trying to say, oh, my diabetes is so bad, it's so terrible, it's so hard. Because it doesn't matter if you take 20 units a day or 200 units a day. Diabetes is hard. And every single person who has diabetes, the amount of insulin that they take impacts what their blood sugar does. It impacts how their bodies function. If you take too much insulin, you experience hypoglycemia. And if you have a severe enough hypoglycemia episode, then you pass out and you have a seizure. That's happened to me twice over the last couple of years. Scary as crap. The first time it happened, I ended up with PTSD and didn't move off of my couch for a week because I was afraid to move or breathe or eat or sleep or do anything because I was terrified I was going to end back up on the kitchen floor again and not know what the heck happened. It is traumatizing. The second time it happened, I didn't completely pass out. I knew what was going on. I was still aware. And even though I couldn't, it's almost like I had tunnel vision. So I wasn't completely aware, but I was still having conscious thoughts. And my only thought was like, oh my gosh, this is chaos. Like, this is pure chaos. Whatever is going on in my head right now is chaos. And then I woke up and my husband was like, you had a seizure. I'm calling 911. I'm going to call your mom. I was okay after that one. because I didn't completely lose consciousness. And this go around, I was on antidepressants and my mind was in a much better state than what it was the first time. Anyways, so that's what happens if you take too much insulin. If you don't take enough insulin, then you go into what is called diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA for short. Essentially, DKA turns your blood to like acid and kills you from the inside out. Your blood sugar levels can get so high, and if it stays that way for so long, the blood in your body, it's almost like it becomes toxic because there's too much sugar in it. It ultimately can lead to death. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Back in 1923, the creators of the drug, now known as insulin, sold the patent for insulin to the University of Toronto for $1, a dollar, 100 pennies, 4 quarters, a dollar. They sold the patent for that price because they wanted everybody who needed it to be able to afford to have it. They didn't think that it was fair to charge a crazy amount of money for a drug that was going to keep people alive. In 1999, a vial of Humalog insulin, which is a quick-acting insulin, cost $21. That same bottle of insulin in 2019 cost $339 without insurance. I remember whenever I came off my insulin pump as a kid, I quote-unquote broke my insulin pump. Yeah, I did it on purpose because I hated it so much. But we had to go and buy a bottle of insulin. I can't remember why we had to buy it. My insurance didn't pay for it at that point, but we had to buy a bottle of long-acting insulin. And that was in probably the early 2000s. I remember that bottle of insulin cost $79. The last time I had to buy a bottle of long-acting insulin because my pump failed, if I wouldn't have had a savings card, it would have cost me somewhere around $600 for one vial. The price increase on insulin has gone up over 1,000% since 1999. 1,000%. I was so blessed for the past year to be able to get all of my insulin. I was getting 14 vials of insulin for $35 through Express Scripts, where my husband was working. He was the insurance had a pharmacy program with Express Scripts, and Express Scripts was great with insulin. I don't think that I've ever paid that low of a price for insulin before. And that 14 vials lasted me somewhere around 3 months. My husband got a new job. Same insurance company, different plan, but same insurance company. For 4 vials of insulin, we were going to have to pay $250 for 4 vials. When with the other plan, we were paying $35 for 14 vials. That's criminal. That is criminal. And then you have these, quote, savings cards that are supposed to make your prescription $25. That's bull. I'm sorry, it's bull. You can't get the $25 insulin unless if you only use a certain amount of insulin. Then, after that, they lower the amount of insulin that you can get, but still charge you $99 for that amount. Which, granted, $99 is better than $250, but I need more insulin than what I can get for $99. Now, I could go through the delivery pharmacy program with my husband's insurance and get my insulin shipped to me for 3 months at a time for $250. But that's still $250 when before we were paying $35 for 3 months to keep me alive versus $250 either for 3 months or for a month's supply at Walmart to keep me alive. I'm sorry, but I don't think that I should have to pay with my life for the drug that is supposed to keep me alive. Do you know how many people have to ration their insulin, that have to take less than what they need to stay alive because they either can't afford what Big Pharma is charging or they can't get insurance? And even if you have insurance, you still can't afford it. It's criminal. It is criminal that diabetics are dying because Big Pharma and the manufacturers of insulin think that they have some monopoly on our lives because they're the only ones making the drug that we need to stay alive. It is criminal. And I have told my husband, if for some reason I die because I can't get my insulin, he better sue. He better sue Big Pharma. He better sue the insulin manufacturers. He better sue whoever the heck he can in hopes that he can get some sort of justice for me. Because my life is not for their profit. My life is not for their penny. It's not to load their pockets. I understand inflation. Okay, I do. I get that. I understand that there's not a lot of synthetic insulins that can work like, the name brand ones. I get that. But how in the hell? And I'm sorry. If you're somebody from church and you're listening to this, I apologize. I apologize. Lord, forgive me. How do you sell the patent for $1? $1. And then, however many years later, decide that you're going to charge God knows how much. I don't even want to know how much it would cost to get a 3-month supply of insulin without insurance. Because of a 3-month supply with the insurance that I have now is $250. What in the world would you do if you didn't have insurance? How are we supposed to survive? Now, if you have state insurance, then you get kicked off of your parents' insurance after you turn 26 or 27. State insurance is usually pretty good about covering diabetic supplies. They may not cover exactly what you want, like the type of insulin that you want or the insulin pump that you want, but if you have that state insurance, they will typically cover it all, like completely. Whenever the quote-unquote Affordable Cares Act went into place, I know that a lot of people benefited from that. I do. But I lost my insurance before I was 26. So I was paying out of pocket for my diabetic supplies. And at this point, it was only insulin. And I used the insulin pins. So I was buying the insulin pins and the pin needles. And then I was able to get a blood glucose meter, test strips, everything like that from Walmart, like the Walmart brand meter and strips. And that's been several years ago now. I was 22, I believe, whenever I lost it. 21 or 22. And also at that time, you think, oh, well, why don't you just get a job where you could get insurance? I tried. But at that point in time, nobody was hiring full-time employees, and part-time employees were not eligible for insurance anywhere, at least not in my town. I was limited to what I could do. to help myself. And even if I would have gotten the Obamacare bullcrap, it would have cost more to have that than to pay for my insulin outright. And it still wouldn't have covered my insulin completely. So not only would I have been covering a crazy or paying a crazy amount of money out of pocket for insurance coverage, I would have also been paying on top of that for insulin. That's criminal. I don't think that universal healthcare is the answer. I don't. But our healthcare system needs to be revamped. Something needs to be done with it. There are too many people who are suffering, who are dying, who are rationing their insulin, who are beginning to experience complications from diabetes because they have to ration their insulin, because they can't keep their blood glucose levels where they need to be, because they can't get what they need to take care of themselves so that they don't have the complications. I am a walking testimony of that, okay? I didn't take care of myself like I should have growing up, and I'll admit that. But at least whenever I had insurance, I had no vision problems. And it wasn't until after I lost my insurance and was having to scrape to get by, my family was having to choose between paying rent or buying insulin, between buying food or buying insulin, between paying the electric bill or buying insulin. So in that time frame, I could not adequately care for myself and care for my diabetes the way that it needed to be taken care of. And in that time frame, my body went through hell. And I am still paying for that today. So not only that, but then you have the gadgets, or as I like to call them, the robot parts, like the insulin pumps and the continuous glucose monitors, the CGMs. I am so thankful that I have my Omnipod. It has radically changed my life. It has made my diabetes manageable. It's not perfect, but it's manageable. My Dexcom has literally saved my life. It has literally kept me from going too low. It's also been ineffective sometimes because it wasn't reading my blood sugar whenever it was supposed to, but technology isn't perfect. But it has saved me more than it has led to mishaps. I was fighting for weeks a few months ago to try and get my Dexcom covered by my husband's new insurance. My insurance doesn't cover it. The other insurance that we had, $219 for a 3-month supply. Still pricey, but doable. Not bad. But the same insurance company on a different plan doesn't cover it at all. I tried to sign up for the Dexcom's financial assistance program. I'm not eligible because I have insurance and because I'm not at the poverty level for income. So what am I supposed to do? Lie and say that I don't make any money, that I'm not married to someone who has a great job, that I don't have insurance? Because my conscience doesn't want me to do that because lying is wrong, right? But everything else in me is like, I need the Dexcom because I don't feel my low blood sugars. If I don't have the Dexcom, how many more seizures am I going to have and which one is going to kill me? So what do? I am very, very thankful that Dexcom has a startup program. They give you a cash price if insurance doesn't cover the Dexcom. I think it's around $200 a month. That's still a lot. For a lot of people, that's still not doable. If I was paying outright without insurance for my insulin pump supplies every 3 months, it would be almost $3,000. I'm sure that there are other pumps that are a little bit more affordable, but not every pump is going to work for everybody. I love my Omnipod. It works wonderfully for me, but it may not be what works great for somebody else. And I think that you should be able to choose what works best for you. Like right now, the insulin that I'm on doesn't work as good for me as the insulin my other insurance covered. Supposed to be the same thing, but for some reason my body reacts better to Humalog than to Novolog. But I can't get Humalog because insurance doesn't cover it. Why does insurance have the right to say what we can and can't have? My primary care doctor has been trying to get me on Mounjaro or Ozempic or something to help just with my insulin sensitivity. Insurance won't cover it because I'm not a type 2 diabetic. Why does insurance get to say what someone can or can't take? They're not the doctor. If the doctor thinks that it's going to work, how come insurance can come in and say that they can't have it? That's criminal. And it's the reason that I'm focusing on diabetes and diabetic supplies is because I am a diabetic. But it's not just diabetics. It is so much more than that. Try to get an EpiPen. Try to get an inhaler if you or your child has asthma. Try to get any kind of life-saving medication or treatment done. It's not just diabetes. Not only does insurance try to tell you what medications you can and can't take, they also tell you what doctors you can and can't see, if it's in or out of network. Some doctors in your own town are not going to be in your network. What if you change insurances or your insurance plan changes with work and the doctor that you've been seeing for years is now out of network? You have to pay more for that. I went to the doctor a few months ago now because I had strep throat. I had a $25 copay. Okay, that's not bad. A couple of weeks later, my debit card gets charged almost $170 for them to gag me with a Q-tip, run it through a system, look at my throat, and tell me I had strep throat. It's criminal. I don't think it's the doctors and the nurses, surgeons. I don't think that it's them, but insurance in itself and the healthcare system in itself, it's warped. It's wrong. It's money hungry. It doesn't care who it kills or who it keeps alive. And I think that as time goes on, the more people who die because they can't get their medications, they can't afford their medications, there needs to be action taken against these people and these places. Well, why don't you just get a job and help cover the cost, Tess? Wouldn't that make it better? What if you got a job and got insurance yourself? You'd have 2 insurances covering you. I can't do that because when I didn't have insurance and I wasn't able to take care of myself, it caused damage to my eyeballs, and 90% of the time I'm blind. Won't you try to get on disability? That would help. Well, the thing about disability is that type 1 diabetes isn't covered by it. It's not an eligible thing. They say that they are, but if your diabetes is in good control, if your A1C is all right, then they don't care. If you have complications from it, as long as one eye is good, you can't get disability for being blind in the other one. And since my eyes take turns, one eye is always good enough. I try to do what I can to help my family when it comes to paying the ridiculous prices of the things that I have to stay alive, and the guilt that I have lived with my entire life because of the money that I know has to be spent to keep me alive. That guilt is unreal. It is unreal, and it is unfair. And I know that I'm not the only one who lives with that guilt. That guilt of knowing that if you didn't have to spend $250 on this tiny little vial, that could be used to go to rent, that could be used to go to the electric bill or groceries or a vacation, that could be used for your health and not mine, that could be used to fix your vehicle, that could be used to do whatever. But no, that money has to be spent on me. Because if I don't have that, then I'm not going to be here. Do you know how many times I've given my husband an out because of my diabetes? Because of the complications it's brought? Because of the money that he has to spend to keep me alive because I can't do anything to contribute to it outside of the home? That's criminal. And it infuriates me. It infuriates me that these insurance companies think that this is okay. That the makers of insulin think that this is okay. That they can charge people as much as they want to, knowing that they have to have this drug. If they don't spend this money on this drug, then they're going to die. On June 27th, 2017, Alex Smith was found dead in his apartment 26 days before his death. He turned 26 years old and was no longer able to be on his parents' insurance. He couldn't afford the $7,669 premium or the $446 copay that was supposed to come out of his check every week for insurance of his own. He was going to buy insulin out of pocket, but whenever he went to pick up his prescription, he didn't have enough money. He decided he would ration his insulin until he could save up enough money to buy his insulin outright. He didn't have enough. Alex Smith was 26 years old when he died, 26 days after turning 26 years old, because he couldn't afford the one thing he needed to stay alive. He died of diabetic ketoacidosis. There are hundreds of others like Alex Smith who are dying every day because they cannot afford their insulin. This is not healthcare. This is not healthcare. It is criminal. The fact that people are losing their lives, not just diabetics, anybody who has any kind of chronic illness, because they cannot afford the medication that keeps them alive. It's criminal. It is murder, and you cannot convince me otherwise. I am thankful. I am blessed because I have always been able to have enough insulin. My mother did everything she could to make sure that I had my insulin. The second my husband and I got married, as soon as we got back from our honeymoon, the day after we got back from our honeymoon, he was getting me put on his insurance. But if you're paying every week for insurance, why do you still have to pay so much for the medication? If you're paying every week for your insurance, shouldn't your insurance cover more of the cost, if not all of the cost? But give a drug addict free Narcan, that's fine. Give someone who's choosing to do drugs, risking their lives for a high, give them the life-saving medication they need for free. Carry it around in your back pocket. So if you see a drug addict passed out on the side of the road, you can just give them a dose of Narcan and they'll be fine. But the people who really need medication the people who didn't choose to be sick, the people who didn't choose to have a chronic illness, the people who didn't risk their lives to get high. No, they have to pay with their lives to stay alive. You know, I thought that this episode was going to be a lot different than this. And I know this isn't the kind of true crime that you really think about being true crime, but this is criminal. It is absolutely criminal. And I don't understand how, you know, big pharma and these drug companies are getting away with this. And there are people fighting it. And there are people in the government trying to get caps put on how much you pay for insulin and different medications, but it's not working. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what we can do. All I know is that my life is not for profit. It is not to line somebody's pockets. It is not to fill up somebody's bank account. And as long as I have a voice, it is going to be heard. I don't care how many times I have to yell, how many times I have to cry. I do not care what I have to do. My voice is going to be heard. If you or someone you know has a chronic illness, type 1 diabetes, asthma, allergies, anything at all, and the medication that you need to keep yourself alive is too much, insurance won't cover it. Companies' savings cards are for the birds. You're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. And I don't know what the answer is. I wish I did. I wish I could tell you what we can do to make a change. Obviously, we can't boycott the medications that we need to stay alive. And please, whatever you do, do not hit me up and tell me to try cinnamon or cucumber or okra or any herbs and spices, because that's not going to make my pancreas magically start working again. No offense. Just like fresh air isn't going to help an asthmatic not have an asthma attack. Like, we need the insulin. Your body just makes it for you. I'm sorry for the emotional roller coaster that this has been. It has been way more heavy than I thought it was going to be. It was not my intent to scream and cry. So I do apologize. But like I said, this is a crime. It is criminal. The people who lost their lives because they couldn't afford to get their medications, they didn't die, they were murdered. While it's not diabetic related, I think that it shows a really good portrait of what the pharmaceutical industry is like and what some of these drug companies are like. Watch Painkiller on Netflix. It's a limited series. It's about opioids, and it is very eye-opening. And I truly, truly wish that we could take on Big Pharma as a whole and sue the living daylights out of them and win. But unfortunately, I don't think that's a possibility. But thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I really do appreciate it. Again, I apologize for the emotional roller coaster that it's been. If you are not following us on Facebook, please do so at For the Record with Tess Heard. We also have a private Facebook group for fans of the show. It is called The Record Keepers. If you have a case that you would like me to cover, send an email to fortherecordwithme@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at type.1.tess. 1 is spelled out. And if you haven't already, please hit that follow button or that subscribe button on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, then please leave a 5-star review because, you know, that really helps your girl out. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this week. Next week, I promise I will have the case that I wanted to do 2 weeks ago. It is going to be over a cult. That's one reason why it's taking so long. There's a lot of information to it. Cult crimes. I hate to say that I have a favorite type of crime, but cults are my favorite. I will just deep dive into cults, and something about them. The psychology of it, I guess. So Tune in next week for a classic cult crime. And until then, the record will so reflect.